Okay, I'm gonna try and do this unedited because I just don't have time to edit. I'm moving but I did see this new movie called Men in theaters tonight, and it's about a woman who loses her husband in a really, really messed up way, and she goes to this house in the country. I think they're like in the English countryside. I'm not sure exactly where they are, but they have accents. And she's trying to heal from what she's just gone through. And she encounters a bunch of men, has a lot of really messed up experiences. There's a lot of symbolism. It's an artsy movie, so there's this big message there. It's not supposed to be, I guess, so literal, which maybe my brain just doesn't work that way. I knew there was a big message, like obviously, you know, it's this commentary on men. But it starts out really nice. There's a lot of really thoroughly creepy things that happen, and I just thought it was going to go somewhere completely different than it went. I think it's one of those movies that paces itself pretty well until the end, and then it goes off the rails and then kind of abruptly ends. And so there's supposed to be a message there, but it's not like wrapped up in a neat little bow. The whole time you're thinking, is this in her head? Is this actually happening? And in the end, it's kind of answered, but it just doesn't end well. So I wouldn't recommend this movie unless you just have a burning desire to see it for yourself. But the end is bad, and it's personally, I just don't think is worth seeing. You know, the ending kind of tarnishes the rest of the movie. Honestly, it's not very well put together. And to me, I just thought that the movie was going to go in a different direction. The whole time I was seeing everything happening and like thinking where it could go, and then the ending wasn't satisfying at all. And it could have been really, if it had a better ending, it would have been a good movie. That's the spoiler-free part of the review. So I can kind of go more into detail on just the things that I saw, and I don't know if you care to hear my thoughts. So her husband is abusive towards her. I guess he's been abusive, and that's why they're getting divorced. You don't really see how their relationship is prior to this, but she tells him that she wants a divorce, and then he says he's going to, I know that YouTube flags stuff and you can get in trouble for saying certain words, but he's threatened to not be around anymore. And he's putting all this on her, and he's saying it'll be your fault. And then he discovers that she's texting with her friend or her sister about their situation, and he gets angry because he wants to see more of the messages and tells her to unlock the phone, and she won't do it, and then he hits her. She kicks him out and is like adamant, it's over, it's done. She's so mad. He goes up to the apartment above theirs, and she doesn't know if he's up there trying to shimmy down to their apartment to get back in, or if he's making good on his threat. Either way, he falls and winds up no longer with us, and she goes down to actually see him, and you see the state that he's in after he falls. And she goes to this house in the countryside. I feel like it's so, like, we've seen this story before where someone goes through a traumatic event and they have to just get away, and they need to be away from people. And personally, to me, I think it's creepier when you're in that setting versus when you're in a city and when you're around a lot of people, personally. The guy who's the landlord shows her around, and says little things that are kind of creepy, but he mostly seems harmless. But given the title of the movie, you kind of think something more is up with him. So then, after she's given the tour, she decides she wants to go explore the woods. And she's just walking around the woods, and then she comes upon this tunnel. And she's like, kind of seems scared at first, but then she starts like yelling into the tunnel and then like singing and making this full on like, the echoing is weird too, because I don't think echoes work that way in a tunnel. I mean, like they just kept on going, and then she kind of started this like, she would like make different sounds in conjunction, and it was like, I don't know, it was doing this whole weird thing where it just keep going and going and going, and I just didn't think echoes worked like that. So she's about halfway down the tunnel and having a good old time, and I'm just like, how are you in this dark tunnel just like having a grand old time? Like, that's not my scene. I just, once again, if I was in a horror movie, there would be no horror movie. I just wouldn't. It just wouldn't happen. I wouldn't, first of all, from the get, I would not be out in the woods, because, I mean, people, but also like bears and whatnot, like that's not, no thank you. So she's just having a good old time, and then suddenly somebody at the end of the other end of the tunnel stands up and then walks towards her and doesn't say anything, and then starts running. And she starts running away, and then you hear this like, ah, kind of in the background that lets you know that he's still out there. She gets lost because she loses like the path. She walks by like where she climbed down to get on these, I think it's like an old train tracks or something, I don't know. Then she comes upon these like abandoned houses, and she's just like, oh, what's this? And she's like walking inside of them. I'm like, once again, you're being pursued by somebody, some unknown person that's like running after you and yelling, and you're just gonna take the time to explore these ruins. Ma'am, no. I know you've been through some things, but just no. And that's the thing that like drives me insane, is like, are these parts in movies? It's like, is this realistic? Like, would most people actually behave this way? Because no. The second, first of all, well, I wouldn't have been down there in the first place, but the second that I saw some dude running down the tunnel towards me, I would have run so fast. I would have had a panic attack, number one, but I would not be stopping to explore. So she gets to this open field and turns around and decides she wants to take a photo of these cool ruins. As soon as she snaps a picture, she knows there's a naked dude standing there looking back at her. And then she just like awkwardly turns around and walks away. And he just stands there, seeing her off. Cut to, she's back at the house talking to her sister, which I didn't realize it was her sister, because I thought it was her friend, because she sounds American. The actress, I think, is like British, Scottish, or whatever. The main woman, I think, is Irish. So that threw me off, but apparently she's her sister, and she's talking to her and giving her a tour of the house. Naked dude finds his way up to the house, and he's looking at her through windows, but she doesn't immediately notice him. Then she finally notices him eating an apple off of her tree, and she calls the police. And he's actually still there when they get there, and they arrest him. Later on, she goes to explore this church near her house. And there's just like so many movies like this where someone just like goes off somewhere new, and then it's just like things aren't right and there's weird stuff happening, and then they just go off exploring, and then more weird crap happens. Like, this is, I mean, we've seen this a lot in horror movies. But she's in there, and she comes like, it looks like a regular church, except there's this weird like bowl thing that's carved into, and it looks like some kind of mythological god or something on one side, and then the other side is like this stone carving of a woman like giving birth. It's pretty bizarre. She goes out back of the church, and she's walking, and she comes upon what looks like a boy. It's the body of a boy, and he's wearing a mask. But then when he removes the mask, he's got a man face. And he asks her to play hide and seek, and then when she won't, he calls her a bitch. And then the guy who's like the father or pastor or whatever he is, I'm not religious, I don't know the right name of like what this person would be. But he comes and talks to her, and at first, like, she has her guard down because, you know, this is like a man of God, and she thinks that she's going to be comforted and counseled and everything. And at first he does, but then he starts asking her weird questions about, like, basically that she made her husband, like, because she didn't forgive her husband, she is to blame for him killing himself. So then she leaves and she goes into this pub that's near her house. And right away, what strikes me is, like, all the men look like they're the same person. They're slightly different, but I'm like, okay. At this point, I'm thinking, I'm way off base here, knowing what happens in the end. But at this point, I'm thinking, okay. At this point, I'm thinking, okay, we've got a church, which has like a weird dude leading it. Then we have this pub where all these dudes look the same. There's been only one other woman, which was a policewoman, that like wrote up a report when she came to her house for that naked guy. So I'm like, okay, there's some kind of weird cult, and like maybe they need her to breed, or like maybe they're gonna sacrifice her or something to like make more dudes that like look like them. I don't know, like that she was gonna like. They were gonna like impregnate her or whatever, and like then, oh my god, that scared the crap out of me. I don't even need my monitor up right now because my husband went to sleep, so we sleep with our toddler in the bed. But he coughed and it scared the shit out of me. Oh, and then that scraping sound on the marble made my skin crawl just now. Okay, so the police officer that arrested the naked guy shows up, and he lets her know that they released him because he didn't do anything. And he's like trivializing it. And she's like, he stalked me and tried to break into my house. And he's like, well, call us if you need us again or whatever, like being really dismissive. She goes back to the house. Naked dude is still on the prowl. So another thing that made me think it was a cult is because this guy, like some kind of nature worshiping cult thing, because there's this scene where this guy, the naked guy, cuts a wound into his forehead and sticks a leaf in it. And then when she finally sees him, because there's like an attack on her house, and she like goes outside, and he's bursting with growth, with like literal like plants are growing from his body. And she runs back inside, and there's this like weird artsy scene where he sticks his hand through the mail slot, and she grabs his hand because before then he like blows these dandelions in her face and she ingests them. And so I'm like, okay, is she in some kind of trance? Is she gonna like join their cult? And then she grabs his hand and then she stabs him, and then he like, there's this really gross like slow scene where he like pulls his hand back through the mail slot, and then the knife is just like, it's like sliding through his hand, and so it's like all split open. Then the other guys start showing up, but they all have like a messed up hand. So I'm like, okay, so all these guys are one person or one creature. So I'm like, this is some kind of like shape-shifting creature. And then she's trying to escape, but she can't because like one of the dudes comes, like the caretaker that you think is like maybe the one nice guy, she accidentally runs him over, and then she's like, oh my god, and then he like comes up to the car and then drags her out, and he's like one of them, or like the guy or whatever, that they're all the same. She winds up going back to the house because she's walking down. So after she gets her car stolen, she's looking up at the Milky Way galaxy in the sky, and I'm like, lady, again, just focusing on the wrong things. And then he comes back and he's trying to mow her down, and then he wrecks the car. And this is where it goes off the rails, because Leaf Dude shows back up, and he's like, kind of looks like his face is all grown out with, it's like green, and he's got plants on his face. And he has this growing belly and he gives birth, and it's pretty graphic, like front and center. But then he gives birth to another one of those guys, and then that guy grows a belly and gives birth to another one of the guys, and so on until like, so she's like backing up into the house as this is happening, and she's just like not saying anything and just watching, just like keeps backing up and just like watching these dudes give birth to each other until finally, feet first, out of the last guy's mouth, her husband, who was no longer with us, is birthed. And he comes and sits down next to her, and she's like, "What do you want from me?" And he says, "Your love." And then we see her sister show up. And this is how we know that something has happened, because she shows up and the car is still wrecked. Her sister's car is still wrecked. There's blood in the entryway of the door. And her sister is sitting outside in what was once a white dress that is now pink. And then the film ends. And the whole movie theater was just like, what the fuck? First of all, like maybe 15 other people showed up, and there was like guys, maybe like teenage, early 20-year-old guys next to me down the aisle, and they were horrified at the birthing sequences. And then one guy in front of me was like telling his friend, like, okay, you don't pick the movie anymore. Like, I think that the theater that I watched it with was pretty disappointed, as was I, because like I said, you know, leading up to it, there was just all these details and interactions that I was reading more into, and then it goes off the rails and then just ends. So when I came home, I looked it up, and it had like a 73 or 76% approval rating on Rotten Tomatoes, which I think is definitely higher than I thought, you know, given my opinion on the movie. And you know, it was, there were very artsy shots. There were pretty, like shots that were like pretty in the movie. And a lot of times with these movies that are like this, I feel like I miss the point of them. Like, not that I'm not smart enough, because I knew this was some kind of, this was commentary on men and symbolism, you know, all this stuff like about men and things that happen in life that are very real. But the birthing sequence, like one article that I read was talking about how like it was symbolic of the fact that how men are is how they're going to be through the generations, or like, you know, each generation of man to come, they're all the same. That's what one article interpreted it, and that makes sense. And then of course, you know, like with the police officer dismissing her and then releasing the naked dude, like it's not believing women, and like, you know, it was trying like in an artsy symbolic way to show, I guess, like all the problems between men and women. I just think that it could have been done better. I think that it was promising. It started out promising. And the ending, I just wish that it could have been better. Because if the ending was better, I would have probably had a completely different opinion on this movie. But this is a miss from me. And that's pretty much it, I think. This is going to be unedited, so I don't know if it's going to be watchable. But I'm just going to upload it directly from my phone. And if you saw this movie and you disagree, let me know your thoughts. And I mean, hopefully some other people enjoyed it. I mean, certainly there's other people that enjoyed it. It wasn't my thing. So it was original. I'll give it that. I mean, I always complain about remakes. So it was original. And that's why I went to go see it. The trailer looked very interesting, but that's pretty much it. So if you like this video, leave it a like, if you will, and subscribe. I do a lot of these kind of movie review videos, among other things. And I'll see you in my next video.